Have a seat. Cross your shins. Cross your shins one in front of the other. Press your hands into your thighs, flex your feet, lift your chest up. Drop your shoulders down. Let your chest lift without pushing your spine forward. Let your eyes close, chin lifted. Take a few breaths in before we begin and identify what's going on with your breath, how you would describe it, what you want for it. Because by identifying where your breath is, you identify where you are. Is your breath short, fast, ragged, slow, hard, easy? Begin by identifying where you are, so you can make a clear, informed choice for where you need to go. Because you may be in a good space. You may be beginning this practice with joy and ease, or with challenge. But it's easy to think that every time we get on the mat, we have to improve. Every time we get into the practice, we have to advance. Like there's something we always have to improve or advance about ourselves. And while it may be true, we all have things that we want to work on, we wish to improve, we wish to advance, we wish to see. Acknowledging how far we've come, acknowledging where we are because the work we have done or just who we are is important too. Not to think it's enough, but to not always think that we are so ill-equipped or lacking that our entire practice must be one of gain. Our practice is not to fix us, but to show us who we really are, even our joys, our happiness. And it would be doing all of our practice a disservice by not acknowledging the joy we have, who we are as happy, or the things that we've gotten through our already done work. So take a few breaths, my friends. Acknowledge where you are because of all the work you've already done. So that you find strength and encouragement to continue doing things. Because as long as we're breathing, there is more to do. Bring your palms together at the chest, thumbs touching the sternum. We'll chant Om shortly 3 times and begin. Om. Bow your head. Salute the essence of yoga inside yourself. Bring your palms into your lap. Let your head rise and your eyes open. Nice. Some more people joined us. Hi, Pratima, Shubha, Ashwini. Glad you all made it. Let's go ahead. Grab a block. And if you have back pain right now, sit on a bolster or something so there's some height under your hips, or you have problems sitting up straight. But sit and stretch your legs in front of you. Again, if you're having trouble sitting up straight or you have back pain, sit on a bolster. But you can sit on the floor in Dandasana, both legs straight in front of you. Take a block, place it between your knees. Narrow. So when you place that block between your knees, flex the feet, pull the toes back, squeeze the block as best you can. Fingertips onto the bolster next to your body, lift your hip or your floor next to your body, lift your spine up as high as you can. I know the dogs will cut you. When you lift your spine up, squeeze in on the block and notice which leg doesn't want to engage. Or what foot is not lined up more with the hip. Like if we look at Tristan's leg, her right foot is more out to the right side of her body than her left foot. You may not be able to correct this immediately. That will probably have more to do with tightness of the hip and the manipulation from the inner groin down near to the knee. So while you're working here, squeezing inward, pull your toes back, flex the feet, lift the spine up, Dandasana. Try to flex your thighs towards the block, even though it's between your knees. And just hold there for a moment. See where you're spending most of your energy in this pose. I've asked you to squeeze the legs in, but are you also gripping in your back or in your shoulders or in other areas? Can you let all the action you do in a pose be about the things that create that pose? And that takes a level of awareness about what we're doing inside of our body to counter that. So if you take a moment and you continue to press your fingers down and lift your spine up, notice, did one leg stop working and the other keep working? Are you gripping on one side of your shoulder versus or side of your neck versus the other? Try to let those areas go so you can just work the legs. Then maybe flex your thighs and push your hips harder into the floor, right? Connect to the asana of the pose, the closest part to the ground. Push that down firmly. And then reach forward and grab a hold of your feet with one in each hand. If you cannot reach your feet, feel free to use your yoga strap to help do this. So after going forward, grabbing a hold of your foot or the strap, whatever it is, lift your spine up again. Re-extend the front side of the spine. Yes, we will lengthen the back, but don't immediately start by compressing the ribs down into the abdomen. Push your feet against your hands a little bit. Squeeze the blocks. If you look at your knees while you're in a forward fold, your knees will kind of tell you which side of your body, probably in your hip or back, is tight, and it's affecting your knee joints and even into your inner groin. One knee will tend to float a little higher than the other. This is not actually because the knee is not straight, but because the muscles that connect from the inner thigh to your low back are tight. So if you see one knee not quite lining up like the other, that's probably the side of your body that's got the most misalignment. So on Tristan, her right one's a little out of whack. So she's obviously got something going on in her right hip. You can also tell like which foot sways off from the line of the block more than the other. Her right one hangs out to the right side of her body more than her left one. So we all have these kind of little tells like that. It's one of the things that we set up the symmetry of our poses using props, like we do in class and things like that, to kind of measure what's actually going on. So then we can actively work poses that will give us the best benefit. This is how we start taking all that knowledge and stuff we learn in class and applying it correctly or in a good way that's applicable to your body. So just kind of get a feel for what's going on in you. Does one leg not want to squeeze the block while the other does the work? Does one knee kind of pop up? Or are there other signs that you see in the symmetry of your legs or feel in your hips that'll also give you that information? Every time you get into these poses, it's constant looking at it and reassessment to see where you are from yesterday or the day before, and to also be able to take this practice as its own unique thing, not a repeat. Very few of my classes I've ever taught are just the same thing because there is no same class. Once a class happens, it's over. Once a practice happens, the benefits are there, but that practice is over. Keep lifting the spine up, pushing the foot against the hand, pulling upright. Squeeze the block. You all right? Tristan says she's all right, but her mid-back's very tight. Good forward folds where you lift will get your mid-back fatigue. Your back muscles have to work to lift on a forward fold correctly to then we can work a little lower. So you're going to hold for a few more seconds. Okay. Let go of your feet, bring your body up. Take your block out from between your knees and bring your thighs together. Then you're going to take your block under your right calf muscle on edge. So your right knee will be slightly bent. The right calf from the thickest part of the calf near the knee down as long as the block is towards the heel. Try to keep the knee slightly bent and push that calf hard down into that block while still just sitting upright, active. Same dandasana of the spine, but the only difference is this right leg is slightly elevated, the height of that block, so your knee has to stay slightly bent. Your left leg is straight, squeezing your left calf into the block. So start, lift your spine up, fingertips on the bolster next to you, lift up, foot flexed, push your calf as hard into that block as you can without straightening your knee. Kind of learn to feel your body mechanic on this. Can you activate the strength of your leg to depress this bone, or does it all come from your poor knee joint locking down? So the knee will stay bent, the thigh will stay active. Push the inner calf into the block as much as your outer calf. And then when you got your leg active, your left leg squeezes into the block and pushes down. Stretch forward and grab your foot. Notice how the leg doesn't want to stay engaged when this happens. That tells you how much you're working from your low back. Spine nice and long, just like you were doing seated forward. Then press the calf down in again. And when you press that right calf down, feel what goes on in your right hip. Did it go off to the side or pop up? Can you keep pressing your hip into the bolster or floor and your right calf into the block? This isn't about getting really deep intensity of a stretch right now. One of the best things you can learn to do is to create good fundamental strength and stability of your muscles. And for some of you, your back might feel this, your hamstring could feel this. But what we're trying to do is teach the larger muscles of your leg, especially, to do the greater work so that the inner thigh muscles and the lower back can release. Most of the time, the parts of us that do the tightest just are doing that because they're overworked, not because they are just tight, because they're overworked. So one of the first things you can do is give them some relief by working other parts. Press your left calf down, squeeze your left calf into the block, push your right inner calf into the block, and hold, and find your breath. Spine lifted, extended forward, pushing the foot against the hand a little bit. So here in this modified action, feel the difference between your left leg and your right leg. What's the difference in your hip on the right side with your leg elevated versus the hip on your left side? Which leg is easier to keep strong? What's the difference in your hip and your back? well, you'll get a little more clarity to what's changed after this side of the pose. But it takes some time. You're working against a lot of muscle that is used to its habit. Getting shaky. She's already starting to shake. Class just started. Uh-oh. Okay, go ahead, take the block out from your right leg, stretch it out in front of you, and then fold forward for a moment and grab a hold of both feet. And just see if there's any difference left to right side. Tristan says yes. Let's elaborate. She says her whole right leg feels like it can descend now. Any difference in your hip and back? Right. She got a release on the whole right side of her body and her back. So that's the difference. Yes, dear.
This my right leg now. I can usually my calf muscle won't touch the floor. Now it's touching. It's more connection. Yeah, thank you.
Very good. Very good. All right. And now she has a right hip cramp. Good. So let's do the other side. Everybody get your block under your left calf. It's just, I always like to use this as an example of how to create release without tension. You don't have to apply more force than the pain you're feeling to make a change in your body. And I want to reiterate, you do not have to apply more force than the pain you're feeling to heal or work with your body. That would be fighting yourself. And you all know, if you've been in my class more than once, I have a big saying about don't use yoga to punish yourself or fight yourself. Right leg squeezes into the block, pushes the calf down. Left calf with the left knee bent slightly, pushes down into the block, stretch forward, grab a hold of the foot, and try to keep that leg. The work is not to straighten it, but to depress that calf down so the thigh muscle works, the hip works, the back muscles work. You're asking all of your body to work together to create stability and health. And I think it's always good, every so often in your yoga practice, to try to develop that in every pose you do. I'm using this pose as an example of that tonight. We're going to do it with a few other poses that'll give benefit, but how do you prop your body up to remove the tension from it so you can get more work from it? That's where Mr. Iyengar started restorative yoga before Judith Lassiter changed and encouraged restorative yoga to be very passive. It was originally a form of, can you prop yourself up to remove the force and the tension so you can stay in it and really explore how it works for you. So push the calf down, squeeze the right calf into the block, spine up nice and long, push your feet against the hand a little bit, and you sit here. And it's not, glamorous, but it is thorough for you. Remember to breathe. So an easy seated forward fold modified just with a block already changes one leg. Okay. I know. Exhale, up you go. Take your block out. Stretch both legs straight, fold forward, grab your foot, or use your strap to grab your feet. Push your feet against the hands a little bit. Try to engage the leg in the same muscular action that you did when you had the block. Remember, it wasn't pushing the knee down, but remember all the muscles that had to fire in your quad, your thigh, your hamstring, and your calf to create that muscle power. Spine nice and long, pulling with the arms to lift the chest up. Don't worry about curling down, that's later. This is about creating these shapes to feel the work into your hips. When you draw your spine forward, that puts it very deeply in the hamstrings. Keep your spine long, you're going to keep it in your hips, and maybe some in your hamstrings, but your hips and your back. She says. All right. So check in with yourself. What are the differences? You got anything? Yeah, Tristan says she feels like her legs can descend. There's a release to her hamstring and the tension of it so she can go forward. Now, sit on up, take your block on edge under both calves, across them both. Get off your Dustin. So with both calves on the block, and you can use 2 blocks or 1 block, whatever, however many you want to use. If it's more comfortable for you to have 2 blocks, 1 down each calf, go for it. Or 1 block across both calves, whichever works for you. Keep the knee slightly bent, fold forward, grab your big toes, and work the pose again. So now you're in it with just your calves elevated. Push your foot against your hand, push your inner calf into the block so there's a slight internal rotation. Flex your thighs. Push the parts that are already connected to the earth harder. So your hips push harder, your calves press harder, stretch your spine up. Good, huh? Where? So for Tristan, she says when doing this modification, instead of legs being straight and it's just in her back and hamstrings, now it's deep in the crease of the hip. The femur bone is moving into the pelvis and dropping down, which makes all that pelvis connection, the stuff inside the inner crease of the hip, groin to the outer hip, fold and stretch. So for those of you trying to release those inner thigh and groin muscles, this kind of extension using the bones of your legs to push back gives that kind of work. Then bend your elbows wide a little bit. If you want more, stretch forward like your ribs are going to touch your knee joints. And it's going to be hard. Even those of us that are very flexible, when I do this, it's like I can't quite get the fold because now you can't cheat with your lower back. Push the calves down, work the legs, stretch forward a little bit. Yeah, okay. Chai is bouncing. Tight hips. This is how you start teaching your hips to forward fold and not make it all about your low back. This will help you teach the extension of your spine, even in the upper spine, for those of us that have really tight groin, low back, and hip issue. Good. Jumping up. Take your legs out. Take the block out. Stretch your legs straight. And then fold forward and grab your foot again. See what the difference is. Now, yeah. Tristan says it's much easier for her. Bend your elbows a little bit and create that extension. But before you start making it all on your back again, remember what it felt like. Push the calf down. The muscles that it took your thigh to flex. How your bones had to move towards your hips. You get more work, but what you ultimately get is stable so you do not put any pressure on your low back incorrectly. Hold the pose for a few more seconds, breathe in it. Exhale, up you come. Bend your knees, bring the soles of the feet together and both knees wide, Baddha Konasana, or bound angle. So traditionally, we grab the foot, we pull it in tight, and then we place our hands next to our hips and move our hips closer to our heels. So you lift your hips up, you tuck your butt towards your heel. Baddha is really interesting because you can work this a few different ways to teach the thighs and hips to rotate. So firstly, just bring the soles of the feet tight together. So your big toe touches big toe, second, third, fourth, and pinky all touch each other. And try to flex each thigh, the large muscle of the leg, not your groin, that'll be different, but flex the quad itself, this large muscle right here, even if your knees have to come up, because here's what is an interesting thing. If you push your feet together really hard without flexing your quads, you're doing it from your groin and your low back. Your knees will pull down a little bit, which makes us think we're doing it right because, we see the masters with their knees on the floor and we think we have to do that. let your knees come up slightly and then try to flex that thigh. And I bet you'll find you can flex it easier. Pushing the knee down only engages the groin and the hip extenders. Lifting your knee up makes this muscle fire. Interesting. So everybody should try to keep the thigh muscle lifted slightly as they push the feet in. Because if you keep your thigh lifted slightly, the thigh muscle has to flex, which will keep it from getting into your groin. Then your groin can stretch. So we'll do a forward fold to kind of check this idea. So everybody push your feet together, let your knees go down as much as they will, and then stretch forward a little. Feel what stretches, feel what grips and works first. Tristan just signaled that it's her inner thigh. For most of us, that's very true. But this is actually a rotating pose to the whole hip extender. It should be able to get our hips to move and our spine to extend. So take a couple of props, whether blocks or pillows or blankets, and prop your knees up slightly higher than they are naturally. Now, for those of you who are very practiced thinking, wait, this is basics. I've gotten past this. No one is past basics. 20 years, then you can be past basics, Mr. Angar would say. We're all novices for the first 20. So now, with your knees lifted slightly, before you fold forward, flex the thigh muscle, not to push into the block, but to push the feet in. So large quad fires. So it feels like, you know, when you fire your quad correctly, it kind of broadens on the inner thigh. Weak, flex. And then push your feet in. Then stretch forward. Keep your thigh flexed, keep your feet pushing in. The more muscle that we can safely engage in a pose, the more we are going to create in that pose. The more benefit, the more knowledge of the pose, and more confidence that we can do the pose safely. Which, you know, classes still haven't started back up. We all have a lot of home practice to do on our own. So we need to be able to feel confident that we own the keys to these poses because this is your yoga practice. But keep firing the thighs, keep them flexed, and then keep stretching forward. You can take your hands out on the floor in front of you as far as you want. And at one point, you might feel like you can't go any farther forward because your knees are up in the air. That would not be your knees issue. This is just showing what the range of motion of your hip really is. So any degree that you fold forward, always make sure you're flexing your thighs, pushing your feet in tight. So the range of motion is coming from a very stable lower pelvis, so your upper pelvis can go forward. Push your feet down into the floor as you keep pushing them together. How's that feel? Weird. Huh? Yeah. Don't worry if your knees don't lay on the floor. My knees do, but this is still an uncomfortable pose. I prop them up all the time because I would rather have a better rotation of my hip joint and release of my low back than, say, an intense force on my groin. So hold for a few more seconds. Take a few breaths. Practice flexing one thigh and then let the other thigh relax and see what happens to one side of your body than the other. If you flex one thigh and then the other's relaxed, you'll kind of lean one way, actually. You'll kind of start tilting. This will show you how important it is to the safety of your spine that each muscle group engages evenly to move forward. And this is where you get into the really masterful work of yoga, that it's not about the complexity of pose you do, but the ability to engage with the complexity of the human body clearly with what you're doing with your body. Mr. Angar would say you could do downward dog or Tadasana your whole life, and if you learned everything about how the body moves in that pose, that's a masterful pose. Bring your body up. Yeah, right. Yeah. So now that you know what it's like to keep your thighs flexed, you can take the blocks out or the props, take one block, place it between your feet on edge. So now your knees are wider, your hips are wider. So already notice the minute you get your block, there's nothing pushing your knees up. Can you let your knees lift and flex them on your own strength? Can you teach the muscles of your leg, now that you've done it in a restorative fashion, to do it in an engaged, focused fashion, or disciplined fashion, as Mr. Angar would say, and then push your feet into the block, but not so your knees go down, but so your thighs flex, even if they come up a little bit. Great. And then stretch forward again. Can you let the joints, your knee joints, float instead of feel like they're being pressed down? It's very challenging to keep the thighs engaged like this, because the tendency is to let the weight go into the lower back or to the groin. Those of you that want to get to very deep seated forward folds like Karmasana, or even some versions of Padmasana and things like that, has to come from a very structured leg set that releases the pelvis for the forward fold. So push in on the block, let your knees float because you're flexing the thigh. Even if it's for a few seconds, it takes a long time, or it took me a long time to learn how to keep my thigh muscles engaged for that process, the length of that process. So don't worry about pressing the knees down. Let your knees float. Thighs. A few more seconds. Keep breathing. Bring your bodies up. Take your block from out between the feet. If you have two blocks, grab two blocks. If you don't, one will be okay. If you only have one block, you're going to take your block flat under your feet while in Baddha Konasana. If you have two blocks, one flat under the feet, and then put your feet up on it, and then the second block between those 2 feet. Oh, yes. Oh, no, Tristan says. So your feet are wider and higher. If any of you are really enjoying this, you can thank Chaya. She asked me a question earlier, so now you can thank her for this wonderful lesson. Now, hold on to your feet, lift your spine up nice and tall. It's easy to fall backwards. Now remember, if you're falling back, it's okay to sit on a bolster or something. Tristan's not right now. But hold your feet, pull and lift your spine up a little, and then already checking, can you push your feet together? And then let your knees float up. So can you push your feet together by flexing the thigh muscle first, not knees down? Knees, I cannot tell you the exact moment I realized my knees could lay on the floor, but I realized the moment happened when I stopped trying to push them down. It sounds very backwards, but by lifting the thighs up slightly, it releases my groin and my hips roll open. This is what creates that openness and that ease for the hip and back. You do not have to keep forcing the tight muscle. Force is just going to is an action of violence, as Mr. Angar would say. And so you're just being violent to yourself. I don't know about you. If someone's violent at me, I resist. So if you're being forceful on yourself, part of you is going to resist. Now you're all tired of the philosophy talk, but this is a very big part of how we can change the language that we work with our body. And once we change that language, it gives us a lot of freedom. Right? Push the feet in, flex the thighs, stretch forward any degree. Yes? Both sides. If you have one side of your back more than the other that is feeling this, that's normal. We all have that little bit of tilt in our pelvis, a little bit of curve of the spine. It's going to work with that muscle. Forcing it harder will not make it better. So work your feet in, flex your thighs so the knees lift, and then just roll forward as best you can for a little bit longer. Releasing the inner groin muscles that go down to the inner knee can be very challenging, but can be very beneficial because it allows us to do a lot of seated poses better. It also gives a lot of relief to the knee. I can always tell when my Hips are out of whack because my inner knees hurt when I walk. I don't blame my knee. You got to work the other stuff. So just check in every so often with your legs, not with the force just you're pushing on the block, but are you pushing equally on the heels? Are you flexing each thigh equally? And are you more worried about curling into a ball than keeping your muscles flexed on your forward fold? Don't worry about your shoulders crunching in and down. Spine lifted and forward moving. Lots of hip work. Lots of the really subtle little hip work. And I know we all do tons of pigeon pose and all these other poses, and we still have tight hips. That's because that's force. Got to change the perception of it. All right, come on out. Remove your blocks. Try it with your feet together, knees wide now with no props. Flex your thighs, do all that. See where your knees land. They're much lower. And then stretch forward a little bit without any of the props and see, flexing your thighs, what mobility is there. Maybe your knees feel a little lower. Maybe your hips feel like they can move a little different. And your groin as well. This is part of what helps release that inner groin, is the flexion of that greater muscle, create lift, and then fold. Come on up. Stretch both legs wide into seated straddle, please. Posare Padasana. When you stretch your legs wide, if you're having back pain or you feel like you're falling backwards, sit on a bolster or blankets or a block, any which way you want. Start here, flex the feet, pull the toes back, and see where you are in this pose before we get all technical with it. Fold forward, take both hands onto the floor. And just a little bit to the stretch, even if it's just like your fingers just move forward. And see what starts to work and doesn't work in your legs. If you look at your knees, one knee probably floats up, the other presses down. If you look at your feet, one foot flexes and the other doesn't. Feel your hips, one is down and the other is up. All these habits easily get in, even if we're doing yoga consistently, unless we are aware when we're doing them and change them, we are just practicing old habit and dressing it up on yoga mat. So with both legs wide, let's take something from the last pose and add to this pose so we can find relief here and the ability to fold forward deeper and stable. You're going to bend your right knee and pull your right heel towards your inner groin. Your left leg is still in its same position out to the side of the body. Grab a block and place it under your foot so your foot is higher up. Block is flat, under your right foot. Yes. So it is similar to Bada. Remember when we had the feet up on the block? Yeah. Yeah, just like that. So with the block under your right foot elevated, you can have one hand, you can hold the foot or you can place your fingertips on the floor and lift your spine up, whichever way you want, but lift your spine up and flex your right thigh, not to push the knee down, right? We're not worried about the joint. We want joints to float. Let your right knee float up so you can push your right foot harder into the block. Really just kung fu chop that block in half with your foot. Because if you push your knee down farther, if you push your knee first to push the foot down, you're never going to get good power on it. Let your right knee lift a little bit so you can flex the thigh to push your foot down more. This is what will actually, for those of us with knee issues, me included, stretch and pull the inside of that knee that also eventually allows the knee to drop easy. Hard, huh? So flex the thigh, push your heel and right foot toes down into the block, especially the heel. The heel's the hard part because the heel, the more you press the heel down, the more you work the inner groin. The more you press the toes down, the more you work your outer hip. Tristan asked, point the toes or let them flex. I would prefer a pointed foot so you don't work the knee. Push the heels down, toes down equally. So you get all around the hip and then stretch forward again. You're probably not going to go super far, right? No one goes far on this. I don't even go far on this. But notice when you press the foot down and do that, what has to change is you get this whole muscle set that gets tight from just being seated, and you're dragging it with your upper body weight. Feel that, huh? Flex your left thigh, press your left heel down. We're still going to do stuff with that poor left leg. Don't worry, you're not out of the woods yet. Few more seconds. Don't you wish I had more entertaining things happening for these seated poses? The dog should be doing trick. Push your heel down, foot down. All right, come on up. Stretch your right leg back out into the straddle. See if there's a difference. Stretch forward a few inches and kind of see what your motion is on each side. Take in the learning part of the pose. What's different for you? Kristen so wonderfully put it. Her right leg is just melting into the floor. Like you're hanging around me too much. Right leg straight to the side. Pull your left knee, bend your left knee, put your left foot up on the block. Huh? Sure. Point your left foot, push your left foot down into the block. Let your spine lift. So either hold the foot and lift, or fingertips on the floor and lift, but get your spine to rise. Push the left foot down. Remember, the asana of the pose is that which is already touching. Engage with that more. Engage with stability. Don't push the floating pieces down. They will come down. See the difference in your knees, Pratima? That right knee goes down really far. That one's a little higher. And with the foot on the block, so you see that's your hip imbalance. Good. Flex your right thigh. Try to push your right thigh down a little bit just so it's stable. You're not pushing the knee down, right? Knee floats, thigh flexes, just like when we had the calf on the block. Let your left knee float, but flex your left thigh and push that heel and that toe set down into that block hard as you can. A lot of I think there's a lot of interesting things we learn out of watching people who are like gymnasts or master yogis that have practiced a lot of the very impressive leg extension work, like they're on their hands and their legs are all over the map. How flexed their legs are that allows their pelvis to move. Or even just lifting your leg in down dog. Most of us want to work our back. I like to use my low back, but the strength of our legs, the ability to extend and rotate that leg, like you're learning now, is more important to the overall health and stability of our hip than how much you just push on the connective tissue. And so we watch those people do those poses or gymnasts perform, their legs are always in deep flexion and extension. There's no point where they're just passive and flinging themselves through the stuff. Fold forward a little bit. Even though you may not go forward far, you still try, but you still ask yourself to flex the thighs and push the heel and toes down. And hold for a few seconds. Let you know when to come out. Hard, huh? That's fine. That's good. Bring your body up. Take your leg out. Stretch your left leg out wide back to Pasada Padottanasana. Take your hands onto the floor in front of you. Engage your thighs so the knee floats, but the calf can press down, the heel down, and then fold forward a little bit. Walk your hands forward. See if there's a difference. And we're still going to do more. I'm not saying we're expecting miracles, but you're getting some different level of understanding of your mobility. Your legs can stay engaged so your spine can extend. Your groin can release. The hamstring can be tight, fine. But we're not going to let the small connective tissue that holds our pelvis and our legs together do all the work. Different, huh? Bring your body up. All right. take one of your blocks under your right calf, like we did when the leg was in front of us. So on edge, you're doing it. Well, not forward, don't do it yet. Fingertips, lift the spine. Right knee bent, right? The knee floats, the thigh presses down. The thigh pushes the calf into the block. And notice, because your leg is higher, your hips might be tilted off on the block. Try to lift your spine equally on each side. And it's going to feel weird, but nothing in yoga feels like normal. Push equally along the calf near the foot and the calf near the knee. Push more on the inner calf so you get the thigh to internally rotate. And then, if you like, move your hands in front of you, walk your hands forward into a forward fold of it. And then notice the difference between your right and left leg. If your right leg stays engaged and your left leg is passive, what happens to your hips and back? Your spine doesn't stretch as easy. It almost feels like one side of your spine can go quicker down than the other. For Tris, like for any of us, if your right leg is engaged like this, it releases the right side of the spine to drop. This is how you actually learn to get into those deeper forward folds and get the muscles to release to allow that movement. Bring your body up. Switch your block to your other leg. I hope everyone's having a good week so far. You know, you're in yoga class. Can't be that bad. So block under your left leg and first start with the hips, get the lift, try to extend your spine equally, even though the left and right side might be slightly different. Push the calf down under the left leg, under the block and left leg. Right leg is active, just not with the knee, with the thigh. And then when you feel like you're ready, exhale, go forward. But always working that left leg and trying to work the right leg like it had a block under it. Soft joints, strong muscle. Be stable in your muscle set. This is how I figured out how to teach my body to do all those poses where you just fold in half, doing this variations of this. As Tristan noted, it's hard and confusing. And I think the confusion, it's easy to get very confused about how to move our leg muscles because we think we want them to be relaxed when we fold forward. But anytime we move the human spine, muscles are going to react to protect it. It's full of nerve. It's literally how we function. The body has stuff in place to protect. And especially if we've suffered injuries or have built muscle habit from dance or other activities. Good. Bring your bodies up. Good. Go ahead, keep the block under your left leg. Bend your right knee, pull your right heel into the groin. If you have a second block, feel free to put the block under your right foot. But if you have one block, I would prefer it to stay under the left leg. But those of you with two blocks, be brave. Pillows work also. Books work great. So, Tristan is not giving me good looks about this. Push your left calf down into the block so the knee's floating. Right thigh floats, right? The quad is deeply flexed. Push your right foot hard into the block. Lift your spine with your fingers. And just work this for a moment. Work a lifted, engaged spine, shoulders away from your neck, head up, right? I've never seen pictures of Mr. Angard doing a lifted pose like this. Head up, so you stretch the whole spine, because remember, your spine goes up to the base of your skull. Your neck is your spine. Lift your spine. Push your feet down, calf down. And just work your legs. Find the strength of your legs here, instead of with your low back. Nice. Shoulders away from your neck, Miss Shuba. There you go, dear. Good job. Hi, Lena. Hold on, I'll unmute you. 2 seconds. I don't think I can. I don't think I can unmute. You'll have to unmute yourself. Oh, how nice. Everyone hold the pose. You know the rules. You ask me questions in poses, you got to hold it.
So while doing this, I'm tending to lean towards my right.
Mhm.
How do I fix that? It just.
If you are leaning towards your right, do you feel your right hip pressing into the floor harder?
Yeah.
Yeah, I would put a blanket like an inch thickness, maybe like a folded up yoga blanket under your right hip to rebalance the pelvis. Keep going, everybody. We're still in the pose. If you want, fold forward some. Take your hands in front of you or grab your foot and draw forward a little. Calf into the block, foot into the block. Better? Yeah. There you go, Lynn. Thank you for your question. I know everyone else is happy for the practice. I am. A few more seconds. All right. Okay. Are you flexing each thigh? Is each thigh pressing its respective part into the block? Stretch forward any degree you can. And we haven't even tried twisting yet. We don't have time tonight, but I highly recommend spend some time, practice twisting poses while flexing your legs in this manner. Totally changing. All right, take your legs out. Oh. Switch them up. Right leg stretched out to the right, block under the calf, block under your left foot, left heel to your groin. Okay. Just a lot. Good. Shubha, move the block under your right calf higher towards the knee so it's under the thicker part of your calf muscle. Thank you, dear. Very good. Chaya, you too. Move the block higher towards your knee on the right foot. Yes. Good, Glinda. Nice. Nice, Pratima. Good use of bolster for your hip height. All right, fingertips next. Fingertips, lift. Lift the spine, shoulders away from the ears. Remember, it's not your shoulders back. That's weird. Push your ribs up. Let your head lift and lift your spine up from the base of your skull. Push your right calf down. Push your left foot down by the left thigh flexing. So you have to push the heel and the pinky toe or all toes down into that block as hard as you can. Because you're working, remember when you push the heel down, you're working the inner thigh, inner groin, hip flexors. You push the toes down, you're getting more to the hip, outer hip. Spine up, ribs up. Calves into the blocks. Hands in front of you, go forward just a hair. If you can, keep your spine up. If you find yourself just totally collapsed, work the lift of the spine with your fingertips more importantly. And again, Lena, if you find yourself falling to the left, prop that hip up. When Lena asked the question, I find myself falling about which side she was leaning to. If you feel your hip, your body weight, when you're doing modifications like this, lean into one hip more than the other, it's appropriate to lift that hip up. So if you're falling to your right, lift the right hip up. If you're falling to the left, lift the left hip up with a blanket or something, because that will help rebalance your spine. For those of us with low back pain, it can really help release that sacral plate, the whole hip, the back hip muscles, and really give a lot of relief there. This is one of the better things to do for low back pain because it teaches your legs to be active and to lift your spine and the whole circumference of the leg muscle, the whole caboodle. A few more seconds. Take your legs out, stretch them both wide, no blocks. Flex your thighs, push down on the calf to the floor like there was a block there. Remember what that felt like, the feeling of the flexed thigh and calf muscle to depress down. Then take your hands in front of you and go forward and see what that's like for you right now. Look at that, Chaya, you're just folding easy. Good. If you find your knees starting to lift up, that's okay. Let them lift. Think about flexing the thigh muscle closer to your hip joint. Feels good. It's a relieving pose. All right. Come on up. Last one. Put one block underneath each calf with both legs wide. We already do this one? No. So one block on under each leg. Fingertips onto the floor next to your hips, lift your spine up. And again, work the pose. Flex your thigh muscles and depress and flatten those blocks. Good, Shuba. Good job taking the blocks wider. Remember, pull that right block under your calf more. Remember, everybody, the blocks don't go under your Achilles tendon. They go under your thicker calf muscle near your knee. So Glenda, pull your block up a little higher, dear. Because we're trying to make the greater muscles work. Now, if you can reach and grab your big toes, by all means, grab your big toes. And then push your calves through those blocks and lift your spine up. Lift the front abdomen. Remember, you're not pushing your front ribs back. You're lifting the front and back ribs equally. So think about those back floating ribs lifting away from your lower back. And then if you want to go forward, bend your elbows a little. Use the arms to draw you forward. Now lifting your spine does not mean pulling away. You can draw your chest towards the floor a little and just hold, work it out, but only from the work of your legs. Press those calves down. Because of the elevation of the leg, you may not go very far forward, but you're going to feel it. It will challenge the endurance of your muscles to hold a healthy shape of your spine. Right? That's what we're here for. We're here to practice health. We're here to practice those positive things that we already are. We're just reinforcing them. Okay. Take a nice breath in. Just breathe. Don't come out. Just breathe. Feel how far you folded forward with this and where the work is in your groin, in your hips, and in your back. If it's locked up, like you feel tiny little groin muscles gripping, you're pulling your spine down too hard and not working your legs enough. If you feel stretched down the length of your leg or your back, great. All right, come on up. Ooh. Take the blocks out. Lay on your back. One more, and then we'll call it. Not Savasana yet. Don't get too comfy. So when you lay on your back, so we started with seated forward fold. Yeah. So we're going to end on the reverse of it. Bend your knees to your stomach. If you have tight back, or you know your hamstrings are tight, put a bolster under your lower back. Just heads up. Scoot away from that. Scoot away from that. When you're laying on your back, drawing both knees to your chest, take a hold of each foot in a hand. Right foot is held by right hand, left foot is held by left hand. The action is to straighten the legs, but not to push them to the ceiling, but to start to straighten them and let your butt lift up off the floor. You're literally trying to roll towards your shoulder and your upper back in the reverse of seated forward fold. So fling your butt up. So Pradima, if you can hook your feet on that windowsill, do it. It'll help. Nice, Chaya. Very good. Glenda, I would put something under your low back to help. Shuba, very good. Now, feel your legs. Wherever, how deep you are in this. Can you activate your thighs like you remember pressing your calf muscle into the block? So go deep into that quad. You're not trying to push the knee straight. The knee can stay bent for your whole life. And I will still think you're a wonderful, loving student. Flex your quads more. And then push your feet into your hands. So the action of your thigh flexing is to lift your hip and release your hip and your lower back. Breathe. Feel that, huh? Take a few more deep breaths. All right, take your legs out. Bend your knees to the body. Take both legs, no arms. Take both legs to the left into a twist for a moment or two. Breathe. Switch legs to the other side. Untwist, stretch your legs out, let your eyes close for a few minutes. Go back, so good. All the work to stabilize the pelvis, to release your low back. You don't have to force it. So my friends, as you rest for the next few minutes, a deep breath in, slow breath out. Reaffirm that the things you've learned and felt are yours. That the work you did tonight is going to change what you get tomorrow. So I encourage you to always let your practice be one, not of force, not of violence, but let your practice be one of understanding, of patience, and of dedication. So you continue to use those qualities to enrich your life and ultimately those around you. Rest for a moment or two. Deep breath in, slow breath out. Take a nice deep breath in. Roll to your right. And as you exhale, slowly up you come. Namaste.